The Bunker is a veteran business incubator to launch and accelerate veteran-owned businesses, and they're looking for veterans like you. So stay tuned to episode 41 of Veteran on the Move as I talk with Marine veteran Dan Parker.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranontheMove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. All right, Dan, thanks for being here on the show today, and real excited to talk about the Bunker. But before we do that, could you give us a little background about what you did in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joe. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, from 2000 to 2005, and I was an O231, which is an intelligence specialist. Eventually reached the rank of sergeant before I got out, and was assigned to mostly aviation units. So was assigned to MAG 26 for a little while, and then HMM 264, and then went over and did a pump with 26 MU in 2003. We did the invasion of Iraq. And then went to, of course, we floated around for a little bit, did some training with other countries, and then went to Liberia for the end of the Second Liberian Civil War. Then I came home for a couple months and chopped over to HMLA 167, which is just down the flight line from 264 there, and went back to Iraq in February of 2004 for another stint over there with the HMLA side. And of course, came back and got out of the Marine Corps and moved back to Kansas.
Hey, sounds great. I probably know some of the same folks. I probably know a lot of folks in HMLA 167. So can you tell us what your transition was like getting out of the Marine Corps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a hard time deciding whether to stay in North Carolina or to, go back to Kansas, which is where I'm from originally. And ultimately decided to go back to Kansas and attend the University of Kansas. And got out basically at the end of June in 2005. And of course, classes didn't start until mid-August. So I had a little dwell time there. But then, got to school, got into the swing of things, and discovered really quickly that everything that they told you about the GI Bill paying for school wasn't exactly accurate.
No.
And had to start working and going to school full time as well. But it actually launched me onto the trajectory that I'm still on today, working with veterans, because I started doing a lot of veterans advocacy on campus.
Okay. And I know from there, that must have been how you ended up working for the VFW in a couple different capacities, right?
It is. Yeah. I started a student veterans group at KU to help resolve some of the payment issues and academic issues that veterans were having on campus. And that grew into, it was still a volunteer position, but a regional position with SVA when they still had those. And then from there, I leapfrogged over to the VFW National Headquarters in Kansas City, working in there. Started out working in their membership department in 2010.
And what were the other jobs you held there at the VFW? If you didn't know that, talking with Dan, the VFW headquarters is actually in Kansas City, so that's where you were working at, right?
Right. Yeah, the VFW, when they wanted to focus on becoming a national organization back in the early 1920s, moved their headquarters. It'd been in Pennsylvania and New York, but they moved it to Kansas City. I want to say 1927, something like that. But I started out there in the membership department. Started out as an intern, actually, and just working on marketing and some advertising and things like that. And, got myself hired on as an associate director, working on marketing campaigns, membership acquisition, trying to work on membership loyalty and all that. So the, new member packets, all that kind of stuff that they send out, just reworking all that. And got promoted to deputy director after about a year. And then about 8 months after that, got promoted to being director of programs, which of course is a different department, but then had oversight over all the youth and patriotic education, and a slew of other programs like the Buddy Poppies, little red flowers that everybody gives out around Veterans Day and Memorial Day. So I had oversight over all those programs.
And so now you're working at the bunker in Kansas City, which the bunker overall started in Chicago just this year. And you teamed up with Sean McIntosh, who's a Navy SEAL, who's also been on Veteran on the Move on a previous episode quite a while ago. And so you and Sean are essentially starting up the bunker in Kansas City. Right.
Yeah, I actually originally met Sean, it was 2005 or 6. It's been a while back now. We were both attending the University of Kansas at the time. Of course, he went back to active duty, and I went into the working world on the civilian side. And reconnected with him when he moved back from San Diego about a year ago. And I'd always been interested in working in veterans employment and entrepreneurship. And we started working on a little project to form a new nonprofit, and then found the folks that started the bunker in Chicago, and they were doing the exact same thing. They just had a pretty healthy head start on us. And they had basically the exact same vision, goals, as far as what they wanted to do, all of that. So they were kind enough to let us throw in with them, and now we're working on opening up the Kansas City location, which, if we're not going to be the second, will be one of the next locations to open nationwide.
All right, well, let's dive right into the bunker and tell us what's going on with the bunker and how it started in Chicago and what the main mission is.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, veterans entrepreneurship and small business ownership, or just business ownership in general, has been a really important driver for the American economy for a very long time. We have anecdotal evidence going back much further, but we have really great evidence since World War II that, the GIs that returned from the war came back, started small businesses, and really drove the U.S. economy through the 1950s and into the 1970s. Just a pretty remarkable period of economic growth. And what we see today is that, veterans still want to be entrepreneurs. They still want to own their own businesses. But the problem today is that the supports that existed to help them transition from being service members into being entrepreneurs and small business owners, a lot of them don't exist. Or they don't, there's more restrictions on them now. So when the original GI Bill passed, it wasn't just education and housing. There was also a small business ownership element to it, where you could get government-backed small business loans. That program no longer exists. And for a long time, to fill that gap, the SBA had what they called the Patriot Express. And of course, that program is no more. So generally now, and part of this because of Dodd-Frank, if you're trying to start a business, you've either got to raise the money yourself, or you've got to be in business for 2 years before you can get any kind of credit. And that's a pretty difficult row to hoe. So that's kind of what really got us started to look at veterans entrepreneurship and how we could potentially help, because we've seen since 1996, rates of veteran entrepreneurship and small business ownership have fallen by over 50%. 96, it was about 13% of your businesses in the U.S. were owned by veterans, and by 2011, that had fallen to about 6%. And what we're seeing is, part of that's being driven by mostly Vietnam vets now that are exiting the market. They're selling their businesses or just shuttering them. But a lot of that is being driven by the fact that, younger veterans, whether they're the current conflicts from Iraq or Afghanistan, or they're veterans from a little bit older from Desert Storm, those supports and those mechanisms that veterans used to have to help start their businesses don't exist anymore. So they're actually only about half as likely as their civilian counterparts to be a small business owner now, whereas traditionally veterans were much, much more likely to own their own business than their civilian counterparts.
Dan, that's actually surprising to hear that, because just from a perception point of view, you hear so much on the news about veterans businesses and programs and resources and stuff out there, but I guess you have to put in perspective of what used to be there. I didn't realize that a lot of stuff had gone away. You mentioned that Patriot Express loan. That must have been pretty recently, because going through my separations classes about a year ago, I remember them talking about the Patriot Express loan. I remember that name, my separations classes. So that must have been fairly recent that one went by the wayside.
It was just a few months back this year. the Patriot Express expired. And actually, we had an interesting situation where we called a regional SBA office, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've got this great program called Patriot Express," and we already knew, so we just wanted to see what they would say, And the lady was really nice, but she had to call us back about 20 minutes later and be like, "I'm so sorry, Patriot Express went away like 6 months ago."
It's always somebody that doesn't get the word, right?
Yeah, right. Like somehow the word was not passed down. But yeah, a lot of those traditional supports just don't exist. And so the traditional avenues that those veterans would have had to kind of help them along the path of becoming a small business owner just aren't out there anymore. And that's a great disservice to a lot of our veterans that want to be small business owners. So we really wanted to try and find a way to work on veterans employment and veteran small business ownership. And we were still seeing a lot of veterans struggling to translate their skills to civilian employers, and civilian employers getting them to understand what that military skills translation meant was the real issue. And so we kind of decided that, veterans could continue serving as job creators and help drive our economy out of this funk we've been in the last few years. And that, they also have a much higher propensity to hire other veterans than the average civilian employer does. So that could also help us alleviate or solve that veterans' underemployment and unemployment crisis.
Speak to the veteran out there that's got a business idea, or may even have a business that's just a spark at this point. What will the bunker do for them, and how do they go about applying and getting into the bunker program?
Yeah, absolutely. The bunker, you don't have to be necessarily post-revenue, but you do have to be post-idea. And there is an application process where you can go on line, and the website is bunkerincubator.com. And of course, if you're, the Chicago office is already open, so if you're in the Chicago area, you can go ahead and apply to be in their next cohort, which will be starting sometime. They just started their first cohort November 1st, so it's a 6-month class. I'll basically just break it down real quickly. The way it works is you take the assessment for your idea and everything, and get feedback on that. Part of the assessment includes, the individual's mindset, whether or not they're ready to be an entrepreneur, because giving up that paycheck every 2 weeks to become an entrepreneur is a psychological leap a lot of people can't make, but that veterans, with being used to operating in fairly dynamic environments, do have a pretty good disposition and experience to back up making that transition. So, that's one reason veterans make great entrepreneurs. Once you get through the application process, the cohort begins, and it's a 6-month education course. The first couple months are pretty basic. If you've already, been through something like Kaufman Fast Track, it's more like that. As you go through the course, we'll try to pair you up with industry mentors who are hopefully veterans, but as long as they've been successful in the kind of the field that you're pursuing, will be a good fit. And then as we reach the conclusion of the 6-month course, we'll try to pair you up with potential investors to help fuel your business. So the idea is to kind of help accelerate you through that first 18 months or so of business in about 6 months, and try to alleviate a lot of the pitfalls that small business owners fall into, as far as just, being entrepreneurs and not having gone down that road before, just having some folks who kind of know the jungle, so to say, and can point you in the right direction and keep you from going down some paths that may not be as productive as some others. Once they've completed the 6-month cohort, they can stay in residence at the bunker, or if they're ready to move out, that's fine too. And then there's continuing education. We'll have night classes as well for additional subjects on everything from like marketing to payroll, HR issues, different things like that the individual veteran entrepreneur can select a la carte and kind of round out their knowledge a little bit better that way.
Well, that's awesome. Are there any costs associated with this?
Right now, what we're looking at is, to cover their space, course materials, all that, about $500 to $600 a month. And that may vary a little bit from bunker location to location. So we're looking at about $600 a month. What we're trying to do longer term is, hopefully be able to just cover that cost outright. But at the moment, what we've seen is that, a lot of these free programs, people don't take them as seriously because they don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the psychology behind having them, invest a little something. And that way, also transitioning into being a business person or an entrepreneur, there's going to be costs associated with just functioning and operating. And so that also, when they are out of the cohort, will kind of help soften the blow psychologically of having a lot of bills to pay when you may not be bringing in as much as you'd like every month.
Yeah, the one of the programs that's similar to this, the Kauffman Foundation Fast Track program, which is also based here in Kansas City, but you can go to one of their fast track programs almost anywhere around the world if you go looking for one, and they even have an online version. One of the complaints talking with the folks there was a lot of the veterans can go to these things for free, and that was one of the complaints, is there's no skin in the game. So a lot of times they don't even show up, which is sad to think, but there is something to be said for having skin in the game. And I had to go back to what you're talking about. I mean, if you've ever tried to start a business on your own, essentially in a vacuum, military term there, planning and operating in a vacuum is never a good way to go, which is really how most people try to start a business. And maybe they got one guy helping them out or something like that. But to have an opportunity like the Bunker, which is a business incubator, and it's for veterans, by veterans, so we all speak the same language. I mean, what an opportunity to have a 6-month immersion in how to do it and how not to do it. And then you can even stick around for a while after that, and also have some reach back capability after you leave the womb, when you run into trouble or need references or resources. So what a phenomenal program.
Yeah, and that's kind of the general idea behind it, is that a lot of veterans, we do absolutely speak the same language, and a lot of veterans are very used to working in something similar to a co-working center, whether it's a talk or jock downrange, or just working in teams. And that's a big part of the Bunker concept as well, is kind of that cross-pollination, that can come from collaboration, and just having that fellow cohort of very like-minded people to sort of bounce your ideas off of and draw on your collective experience together to try and optimize everybody to be as successful as they could possibly be.
Yeah, I've said this on the show before. I've always been an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur wannabe. And a year ago or a little over a year ago, when I was going through my separations classes, and I went to this entrepreneurship workshop, and I was in a room with about a dozen other people that wanted to start their own business. And it was really the first experience I'd had in being in a room surrounded by like-minded, entrepreneurial-minded type folks. And it was like a shot of adrenaline or something. And it was invigorating just being in a room talking with other people about what their business was about and what they want to start their business on. And that experience right there was really one of the beginning experiences that eventually resulted in Veteran on the Move. This podcast was the whole transition experience in trying to transition into being an entrepreneur. And a program like the Bunker, where you can just get that total immersion from experts, not only while the 6 months you're there, but also have the reach back capability, is just what a great program. So, and the first one, or the headquarters, is there in Chicago, and you and Sean are starting up the one here in Kansas City, but there's also several other locations that are in the process of starting up around the country.
Yeah, that's correct. We've got a total of 7 locations we're trying to open by 2016. So not just Chicago and Kansas City, but we're also working on Austin, Colorado Springs, Philadelphia. There's one in the Seattle-Tacoma area, Los Angeles, DC. Trying to think if there's any that I'm missing. I believe we're also trying to go into Columbus, Ohio, and New York City as well.
With the nomadic lifestyle that us veterans have, and if somebody's still in right now and willing to relocate, you don't necessarily have to be from that area if that's the program you go to. I mean, if you're willing to relocate and be there,
right?
I'm assuming that's okay also, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the first cohort in Chicago, I know that they've accepted people from from like halfway across the country from them. So, and of course, the idea is eventually that, we'll have pretty much a bunker in every region, so you would never have to go more than a few hours to your nearest bunker. But starting out, of course, it's going to be kind of a patchwork that we're filling in across the country. But eventually the idea would be to have a bunker in every major city, so that, if you're separating and you're from, you're separating from Camp Pendleton in California, but, let's say that you're from Miami or something, that there would be a bunker there in the greater Miami area that you could go and participate in and realize your entrepreneurial dreams.
And one of the key things to a successful transition is thinking ahead and planning ahead. So I'm assuming if somebody's still in and they're looking to transition in the near future, they ought to start talking with the bunker ahead of time or applying well in advance so that they've got something lined up when they get out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also gives us some opportunities that, if you can run through a boots to business or a COP and fast track for military before you separate, then that even gives you a little bit more of an edge and you're a little more mentally prepared coming into the bunker. But absolutely, the goal is not just to work with veterans who've already separated, but help veterans and service members who are getting ready to separate and make that transition, that want to be entrepreneurs, instead of messing around and trying to be a part-time entrepreneur while you're holding down a full-time job or something like that. Go ahead and just make that leap and get to work on realizing your dream of being your own boss and owning your own business.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages of a military transition, whether you're getting out after a few years or you're retiring. The transition is forced upon you. So you're forced to make a change, which for many of us is a good thing because it's time to move on and go do something else. And if you're in a job and you're able to stay in that job in the same town and not have to change, you might never make that leap. And that's one of the beauties of the military transition. You're forced to actually do something and make a decision. And if you're playing your cards right, if you're saving some money and not living beyond your means, and you got some spare to live off of, and you're willing to live frugally, you can make that transition all in to entrepreneurship, especially by getting involved in one of these programs like the bunker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely on point there, that when you're making that transition from the military, because most people, at least most people I've known, when they separate, they're not hanging around Camp Lejeune or Fort Bragg or wherever. They're going either somewhere to go to school or get a job, or just going back to where, kind of the area that they came from. And so because it is a forced transition, if you want to go ahead and make that leap to being a small business owner or entrepreneur, it's a great time to do it, because it's already, of course, a major upheaval in your life and a huge change. So instead of kind of getting out and messing around for a few years and then deciding you want to be an entrepreneur, it's probably best for the service member or the veteran to go ahead and explore that option as soon as possible and kind of get on the road to being an entrepreneur or small business owner as quickly as they can.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of veterans out there. I see a lot. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and a lot of veterans job boards and companies and stuff like that. And there's a lot of veterans that really come across as being scared, and I certainly can understand that. But you really got to embrace that transition and look at it like an opportunity. So, yeah. I'm real curious if we could dig in a little bit more about the bunker. What is the syllabus like, or what's the day-to-day or the weekly requirements, that kind of thing? If you could give us a little more detail about, and I know the first cohort is in session right now, so it's still probably an evolving process.
Yeah.
But are we talking like you got to be there for a class every day, or people are just showing up and collaborating? What's it like?
Yeah, so one thing that sets the bunker apart from a lot of the other programs that are available to military veterans and service members is that, a lot of the other courses that are out there are 2 or 3 days or a couple weeks, or maybe a couple months. A lot of those are distance education, though. And a lot of them are unfortunately the same kind of thing that a lot of service members and veterans hate, where it's death by PowerPoint, So you're getting a lecture for X number of hours a day. what we try to do at the bunker, and you're absolutely right that the course material and the syllabus is still very much evolving as they run the first cohort up in Chicago. But what we try to do is you've only got, depending on how your specific cohort is structured, about 4 to 6 hours in class a week. And then the rest of the time, you're collaborating with your fellow cohort members and working on building your business and meeting with industry mentors that you've been paired up with. And that's kind of your week, is like, you're going to have a few hours of coursework in there. And then you're going to have, maybe an hour or so meeting with a mentor during the week, or an advisor. But then the rest of the time, you're out there kind of hitting the bricks, working on your business, trying to get stuff going. And, hopefully as you get towards the end of the course, we can get you to meet up with some investors, get you into some pitch contests, or set them up, and really kind of get the business stirred up and running. So,
I've heard this a number of times, that there are people out there that really want to help veterans. You mentioned funding or investors, and there are those investors out there that would really love to see veterans become successful in the world of business. But believe it or not, a lot of these people, they don't have anybody in the military in their family. They don't have any military friends. I mean, we're less than 1%ers, right? So there's a lot of people out there that really would like to see veterans become successful, but they don't know how, and they don't know how to reach veterans. And so if you're a veteran, you got to figure out how to make contact with these people. And a place like the bunker is a place where investors and knowledgeable people and successful people they're going to flock to a place like the bunker, because they know they can help veterans by getting involved in the bunker. So you as a veteran need to get involved in a program like the bunker so you can have access to those people, because it's probably going to be difficult doing it on your own.
Yeah, and that's really one of the main things that we try to do, is that, there's no need for the individual veteran to go out and try and reinvent the wheel when they're becoming a veteran after they separate. And we try to bring a lot of those resources to the table to kind of help expedite that transition and help expedite the growth of their business.
All right, Dan, we're about out of time here, so I'd like to give you the last word. First of all, if there's a veteran out there looking to dive into the world of entrepreneurship, what would you say to them? What advice would you have for them? And after that, finish up putting out the contact information out there about the bunker, in case somebody out there listening is interested in getting involved, regardless of where they're at now or where they may end up at.
Sure. The biggest thing I think about becoming, an entrepreneur from a veteran standpoint is, one, and this is part of what we help do at the bunker, but really making sure you got a sound business concept, because it is a really rugged startup environment right now for small businesses and startups. And that's just kind of part of the condition of the economy and where we're at with the availability of credit and all that. So you really have to psychologically steel yourself to say, okay, this next 6 months, I'm going to have bills, but I may not really be making money, or this next year, and that's really how you got to sit down and look at it, and sit down and, run your financials and do your calculations over and over again to figure out what you're going to need to survive for that year, what the business is really going to take to get started up, and just psychologically what you are prepared to kind of go through. And of course, if you're married, if you're in a serious relationship, you've got to talk to your significant other about how that transition process is going to go. There's several of these angles people have just really got to think about and drill down into, and just make sure that they're definitely mentally ready to deal with the day-to-day kind of grind of being an entrepreneur, where you're not going to get paid the 1st and 15th every month. So that's definitely a huge mental transition for a lot of folks. But then also, be ready for the adventure of it. I mean, it's definitely an exciting process, and it's definitely something that can be a lot of fun as well. But it's a lot of hard work. So, you got to be ready to put your nose on the grindstone and really get into it. With that being said, for the bunker, you can check us out online. Our website is bunkerincubator.com. That's all one word. And if you want to shoot me an email, it's dan@bunkerincubator.com. I'd be happy to correspond with whoever would like to shoot me an email online and kind of let you know a little bit more about the program and, potentially not only what we could do for you as an individual veteran, but if there's anybody that could be interested in being a donor or corporate sponsor or a mentor for one of our veteran-owned businesses and entrepreneurs that are coming through the cohort, I'd definitely be interested in talking to you.
All right, Dan, thanks again for being here. Thank you for your service and what you're doing with what you've done with the VFW and what you're doing now with the incubator, trying to help out veterans. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing your success in the future. So, Semper Fi, brother.
Semper Fi, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.